The film begins with Catherine lost in thought, reminiscing about moments with her son Nick, whom we learn died at the age of 16 in a car accident. Since then, Catherine has been grieving and depressed. She calls her husband Dale to remind him of their dinner invitation. During the dinner, Catherine is sitting with her friend Connie. Connie talks about her husband Jerry's work problems, but Catherine is distracted and not really listening. When Jerry tries to serve meat to Catherine, she refuses to eat it, surprising Dale, as she usually likes meat. Catherine sharply tells Dale that if he were attentive to her, he would know that she doesn't like meat and never eats it. Connie tries to defuse the situation by agreeing with Catherine's choice, saying that meat is harmful and it's good not to eat much of it. Later that night, after returning home, Catherine, having drunk a lot and intoxicated, keeps talking about her son Nick while crying. Dale tries to calm her down and put her to bed to rest. The film then shifts to a young man named Jordy, who is being released from prison after serving his sentence. His father, Carl, comes to pick him up, informing him that his wife, Lisa, is waiting for them. Jordy is visibly upset, and it's clear that he doesn't like Lisa and is bothered by her. The next morning, Jordy wakes up to find Lisa has prepared breakfast and is waiting with Carl. Carl speaks sternly to Jordy, giving him only 1 week to find a job and start working, as he's been irresponsible and troublesome. After Carl leaves for his job as a psychiatrist, Lisa talks to Jordy, welcoming him and trying to be kind, but he reminds her that she's his father's wife and will never be his mother. Meanwhile, Catherine wakes up and finds Dale upset with her for leaving all the responsibility of their son Brady to him alone. He asks her to take Brady to school as he's busy. Catherine quickly gets ready so Brady isn't late for school. After dropping him off, she goes to the site of Nick's accident. Upon returning home, she enters Nick's room, sits on his bed, breaks down crying while holding his clothes. At that moment, Brady enters the room and asks to go to his friend Alan's house, but Catherine refuses due to Alan's parents not being home. Then we see Carl in his clinic, sitting with a person named Walter. Walter has come to talk about the mental state of his brother Dennis, who was involved in an accident. He feels guilty because he was driving drunk on the day of the accident. Carl asks why his brother was with him at that time, and Walter explains that Dennis has partial autism and was going to pick him up from one of his sessions. On the way, he hit a car with a child named Nick inside, who died instantly. Since then, Walter has been unable to overcome the guilt of causing the death of a young child. Afterwards, Walter returns home and talks to his wife, Abby, who seems more concerned with the salad she's making and not really paying attention to him. Walter gets angry and shouts at her. Suddenly, Abby loses her temper and throws everything she's working on to the floor. Later, Abby tries to make amends with Walter, but he is not interested in what she's doing. He tells her he's in a bad mood because of his heavy workload and many lectures. She asks why he doesn't write like he used to, especially since he was always more interested in writing than teaching. However, Walter is very interested in the TV weather presenter Sherry, who is one of his students and with whom he has an admiration. Soon after, Walter finds Abby with her bags, leaving the house. He tries to stop her, telling her he needs her, but she refuses, saying she's endured enough and can't stay with him any longer. She informs him she will be at her sister's place. Meanwhile, Jordy is at a pizza restaurant applying for a job. The manager, upon learning that he has just been released from prison for riotous behavior, asks if he ever stole anything. Jordy admits to stealing a car and expresses regret for his actions. The manager agrees to hire him at the restaurant. Then, by chance, Jordy meets his schoolmate Melissa, who is surprised to see him, as she didn't know he was released from prison. He tells her he was released yesterday and was looking for a job. Melissa tries to convince Jordy to come to a party that night and asks him to try to visit Catherine, Nick's mother. Jordy gets tense and says he's the last person Catherine would want to see. That night, Catherine goes to the supermarket and accidentally sees Jordy. She gets very nervous and hides from him until he leaves. Later, we see Dennis, Walter's brother, calling him for advice before doing anything, while Walter, annoyed and irritated, tells him to do whatever he wants and ends the call. Feeling guilty, Walter calls Dennis back and continues the conversation with him. The next morning, Lisa enters Jordy's room to check if he has any laundry that needs washing. He yells at her, asking her to stop caring for him and acting like his mother, as he has repeatedly told her she can never replace his mother. Later, Jordy sees Lisa coming out of the bathroom and is attracted to her. He tries to get close to her, and Lisa, being submissive, does not stop him, leading to a relationship between them. Afterward, they sit together, and Lisa tells Jordy that her husband, his father, has become old and no longer pays attention to her, leaving her feeling extremely lonely. She feels that since Jordy was released from prison, she no longer feels alone. Then, we see Catherine sitting at the dining table eating with Dale and their son, Brady. She tries to convince Brady to play basketball like his brother Nick, who was a professional in the sport. This annoys Brady, and at that moment, Dale tries to warn her that she's putting psychological pressure on Brady. Later, Brady goes to practice basketball. Suddenly, his father gets injured and asks Brady to bring something to sterilize the wound. Catherine is shocked when she sees Brady with Nick's basketball, and they get into an argument. Brady tells her that Nick is dead and not here to use the ball, and that she needs to wake up and face reality. At the same time, Walter is at the university and meets Sherry. He then takes her with him to visit Dennis. However, when Dennis opens the door and sees Sherry, he gets very scared, refuses to let her in, and shuts the door in her face because he is afraid of people he is not familiar with. Walter tries to calm him down and reminds him that he has seen Sherry before. Walter apologizes to Sherry and asks her to wait in the car. He goes back to Dennis and tries to convince him to get dressed and go out with him. After much persuasion from Walter, Dennis agrees and gets ready. But as soon as he opens the door, he gets scared and refuses to leave the house. Walter goes back to Sherry, who is upset at being left alone for so long. Walter apologizes for what happened and explains that he thought Dennis would recognize her and not be afraid, as he watches the weather forecasts she presents on the news. He tells her about Dennis's condition and how he hasn't left the house for 2 years since the accident. Sherry then asks Walter to take her home, as she is too upset and cannot go out with him. The next morning at the university, Walter gives Sherry a rose, but she is cold towards him and tells him she needs a break from their relationship. At that time, Melissa visits Jordy at the pizza restaurant where he works, encouraging him to keep working there as he seems comfortable and happy. She tells him she waited for him to come to the party. Later, Melissa drives Jordy home, and he invites her to come in and sit with him for a while. They sit together in Jordy's room and talk about Nick. We learn that Melissa had a crush on Nick and wished to be in a relationship with him. Suddenly, Jordy moves closer to Melissa and kisses her. At that moment, Lisa enters and becomes upset and jealous of Melissa. Melissa introduces herself to Lisa, explaining that she went to high school with Jordy. Lisa leaves them angry and jealous. Jordy then asks Melissa to leave. We see Catherine still struggling with severe depression and feeling upset with herself for her poor treatment of Brady. The next day, Sylvie goes to visit Dennis at his home. We learn that she is a girl Dennis has been communicating with through messages for a while, and she wants to meet him to help him. She tries to convince him to go out with her, promising that he will be happy and not upset. Then Walter goes to Sherry's house and finds her with her boyfriend. The boyfriend becomes upset that Sherry is still talking to Walter and attacks him, beating him up. This upsets Sherry a lot, so she throws her boyfriend out of her house and brings Walter inside to treat his injuries. Afterwards, they sit together and both are happy with each other, laughing. Meanwhile, Jordy is out with Melissa. When she brings up Lisa, he asks her not to mention her, saying that he loves her and wants to spend time with Melissa away from any problems. When Jordy returns home to change his clothes, Lisa sees him and argues with him because he was out with Melissa. She tries to talk to him and draw him back to her, but Jordy leaves her and walks away. That night, Jordy decides to call Catherine to meet up. The next morning, Jordy meets Catherine and apologizes for disappearing all this time without contacting her, especially since he was Nick's close friend. He assures her that he had nothing to do with the accident and that it was the other car that swerved and hit them suddenly. Jordy breaks down, crying, and tells Catherine that Nick was better than him in everything and deserved to live instead of him. Catherine tries to calm him down, telling him he is also a good person. She expresses regret for not spending enough time with Nick and is happy to be talking to someone who understands and listens to her, especially since everyone around her doesn't realize she still can't get over Nick's incident. Later, Catherine returns home feeling upset and starts breaking everything in the kitchen. She takes all of Nick's belongings from his room and burns them, even the chain he had with her. When Dale returns home and tries to extinguish the fire, Catherine collapses and prevents him. Dale insists on putting out the fire because he doesn't want his son's things to burn. Then Catherine sits with Brady and apologizes for her treatment of him. She explains that the reason she burned his brother's things is that she can't get over what happened due to his belongings being in the house. She hugs Brady and asks for his forgiveness, telling him they will go to her aunt's house for a while for a change to improve their mental state. When Dale sees Catherine packing her bags, he understands that she wants to leave the house but doesn't want to say it in front of Brady. Catherine tells Dale that she can't forgive him yet because he didn't cry or shed a single tear when Nick died. He lived his life normally from the next day, as if nothing had happened. Dale defends himself, telling her that he did the right thing because that's the nature of life, and life can't stop because of death. Then we see Dennis calling his brother Walter, informing him that he has decided to go out with Sylvie. However, Walter is not interested at that time. Dennis becomes very anxious due to the noise of the street, and after a while he goes into the bathroom to shave his beard, but accidentally hurts himself. He then gets dressed, prepares himself, and starts to encourage himself to leave the house. At the same time, Walter decides to go to Catherine's house because he cannot live with the guilt he feels every day due to the accident he caused, which resulted in Nick's death. But Catherine refuses to talk to him or listen to him. When Walter insists that she hears him out, Catherine becomes furious. She tells him she will never forgive him for what happened, attacks him, and hits him. Then she gets into the car with Brady and leaves. Meanwhile, Jordy returns home and is shocked to find Lisa with a bruise on her face. Realizing that someone has hit her, he confronts his father, Carl, who attacks him violently. Carl accuses him of deceiving Lisa and forcing her into a relationship. During the altercation, Jordy fights back, but Carl is stronger and continues to beat him before throwing him out of the house. Lisa intervenes, asking Jordy to leave, and takes Carl to the hospital to treat his injuries from the fight. Afterward, Jordy goes to Melissa, and they decide to leave the area together. We learn that they have decided to start a new life together. At that time, Dennis is with Sylvie, feeling very happy with the time he is spending with her.